Millions of people suffer from chronic pain. It prevents people from living life to the full, with many resorting to medication, alcohol, or substance abuse to deal with the problem. Dr. Alan Weisser has an extensive background in working with the psychological problems people face when they are living with chronic pain. His practice has provided support for more than 2,000 patients in transitioning them from dysfunction and disability to empowerment and recovery. Dr. Weisser is uniquely qualified to lead others in experiences of self-discovery. When he was 12 years old, he broke his neck in a diving accident. Though he nearly died, he developed an unshakable belief that he could and would recover. Let's start with how would you actually describe chronic pain?
Well, for starters, I don't want to use the word chronic anymore. I prefer the word persistent. Chronic sounds like a death sentence. There are pain problems that persist. On the other hand, certain pain problems that currently persist, eventually there is a way of dealing with it. So if you have something that's persistent, you want to really focus on recovery, not cure. Keep your eye out for that happening because medical science is advancing very rapidly. But think of it as a transition, not as a fate.
So how would you approach people who come to you with pain?
I would say the distinction in our approach is everyone knows you have a physical injury, it hurts, right? So the physical part of it is obvious, right? What people don't understand is I should say they don't in general, but many people don't. Many doctors don't, other professions don't, family members don't know is that if it's persistent, right? Let's say for the sake of argument, you broke your arm, right? And the doctor goes, there's something about this is out of the ordinary. All right, so we'll do the standard treatment, and then they do that, and that doesn't work, and then they go like, I'm better send you to a specialist. Specialist goes, I think Dr. Smith was wrong, so maybe we should try this approach. And the point being that is the longer this goes on where you're not being cured, where your functioning is being impacted on an increasing basis, it's the rock in the water. It creates ripples. It starts to have collateral damage. For example, in an earthquake, the buildings fall down, people get hurt, right? That's the injury. But then there's water shortages, food shortages, medical care shortages. There's all these consequences of the initial injury. So I say to people, look, it's not just about the injury, it's about the collateral damages. And those collateral damages for a typical pain patient can be 50 to 200 collateral damages. For example, because you're physically impaired, you may lose physical activation, physical conditioning, your sleep can be disrupted. Sleep disruption all by itself can increase your pain by 50%, right? You may lose your job. You might have problems in your marriage. Each one of these collateral damages creates stress, and then that feeds back into your pain. So it actually amplifies the pain problem. The problem is you're sitting with a doctor.
So you're actually a different person after, let's say, you had a bad motor car accident where your life has completely changed.
Yeah. And in very specific ways, and physically, on a personal level, existentially. If I say to you, I lost my job, that has some level of meaning. But if I say to you, I lost my job and I've lost my sense of purpose, that is very different. What's missing in the common understanding about chronic pain is existential impact. Right? We have an existential life, right? And that covers everything that we are. But we tend to think of the more concrete things like how I feel, what I think. It goes well beyond that. You have to look to the meaning to understand what's happening in chronic pain.
Yeah. A lot of people seem to be caught up in this sadness and desperation and melancholy over that which was and is no more. How do you get out of that treadmill?
Well, for starters, you have to respect it and honor it. It's a loss. It's many losses, multiple losses, right? And for most people, they think if they allow themselves to grieve those losses, they're giving in. they want to perpetuate the way they used to be. On the other hand, you and I understand that life is not certain or guaranteed, that whatever it is you have at the moment, you don't know if you'll continue to have that. You don't know how much that will change. But just because things change does not mean that you have to lose who you are, or lose your sense of meaning or purpose or being. We are not one-trick ponies. And I basically say to people, okay, I get it. It's very painful. And if you can grieve those losses instead of repressing those emotions or falling into depression and despair, I understand it, but where are you going with that? Right? We are not designed to intentionally end ourselves. We are designed to meet challenges and survive.
So you're telling people to be true to those feelings they have, which could be anger, which could be sadness, which could be their struggle with what fate has presented them with.
Yeah. Yeah, most people with chronic pain don't understand why they're being so affected emotionally. And when I talk to them and I start talking about all these things that have happened to them, my intake packet is 60 pages, right? And those are inventories to look for these collateral damages. Once they see that, we start talking about it, they go, oh, I'm a martial artist. So I say, you thought you were fighting one opponent, you're actually fighting 20, and you wonder why you keep getting knocked down. And it's a great revelation. They go like, oh, okay. And then they realize that part of the reason why they're burdened by their emotional reaction, right? Emotions are not meant to be a burden. They're meant to help you. Is because they don't have a coping system that was designed to deal with this. I refer to this as potential existential extinction events, like the asteroid hitting the Earth. Well, there are certain things that happen in your life that can wreck you. It may not kill you physically. You lose a child, right? You have some terrible illness. There are all these things we think we're prepared for. We're not prepared for them. They can take us out existentially if we're not prepared to cope with them at an optimal level.
Absolutely. Now, there's obviously a difference between someone whose pain is gradual over a lengthy period of time, and someone whose life is instantaneously changed completely as in an accident. What is the difference?
Well, it depends on the extent of the injury and whether it's going to turn into something persistent or not. All kinds of physical injury attack your vulnerability, right? Humans want to walk around thinking nothing can happen to me. I can't be hurt, right? We don't like the idea of being hurt. So a sudden event with significant impact can be traumatic and have consequences that can be dealt with and that needs to be addressed in a similar fashion. But when it's ongoing, it becomes worse. And that I would refer to as a slow trauma. Persistent pain, and remember, I don't just think about physical pain, it's really about impact on functioning. For example, if you had a lot of pain, but you could still do everything you used to do, that's different than I can't do much of what I used to do. So it's really understanding how much damage has been done and understanding that chronic pain is slow trauma. It accumulates. The longer it goes on, the more it happens, the more often you have a flare up, it piles up at the door. And if you're not processing those feelings, that becomes a burden all by itself. And people don't think of it as traumatic if it's slow, but it is.
But
So
obviously
one's more obvious than the other, but it's trauma either way.
Yeah. But obviously someone who's suffering constant pain wants a quick solution. They want it to go away. Take a magic pill and let it go away. And that our whole society is socialized that way. Quick solution. Let's have it, and that's why I think possibly we're having the opiate crisis.
Yeah, that's part of it. I agree with you completely. I'm a person who actually believes that we have the innate ability to heal ourselves. That because our society, a Western society in particular, industrialization turned us away from internal development and has us focus on external. Not that I have any problem with medicine and doctors and all of the rest of that good stuff, but if I say to a person, look, the only way you deal with your pain is to take a pill, you'll never find that if you have any other way to deal with it. That doesn't require that. That doesn't come with side effects. The good news is it all comes down to how you experience what's happening, right? Suffering is not in the event, it's in the person. And there's no one way to experience physical pain or emotional suffering. Helping people understand what's contributing to the way you're experiencing this. How well designed is your ability to cope to deal with something that's unprecedented? It's like COVID, right? Who is prepared for that? Anybody you know have a coping system that was designed to deal with something like COVID or global warming or anything else that's happening right now? So I say, look, there's nothing wrong with you, but your system was not designed for this, but it was designed to evolve, right? We are the product of infinite potential. That's what humans are. We are infinite potential. We celebrate it, we love it, right? We applaud it. We go like, great, Stephen Hawking, how do you do that? Right? Every one of us has that potential. And that's part of what I call an existential immune system. We don't just have a physical immune system. We have an existential immune system, which includes emotions and psychology and existential issues with a toolkit, right? That really revolves around thoughts and feelings. If you know that, and then you learn how to make use of that toolkit, you will optimize your ability to tap into potential. Everybody you and I have seen that's inspiring, who overcomes, without realizing it or not, has tapped into that innate potential to heal
Stephen
both
Hawking is a really
physically
good
and
example
emotionally.
you mentioned there.
Great example. I never met
Great.
the man. I wish I had. How the heck do you do that? I can't imagine doing that. He was like that from his 20s, right? And not only not only did he do what he did with physics, but also retained a sense of humor.
Absolutely. I've just seen him on television, and absolutely amazing person.
Yeah, yeah. But we all have seen other examples of this. But what I look at it and I go like, that is a demonstration, right? That all spiritual leaders, all people that have done things, we go, how do you do that? The martial arts involves tapping into life energy. It's not about physicality. The real power is in being able to focus actual life energy, the same force that I'm talking about, and direct it towards physical encounter. But you can take the same energy and direct it towards physical health and healing. But instead, we're told take a pill, have a surgery, right? Sure, if you need that, if it helps, fine. But I try and get people to understand it's not what's happening to you that is the focus. It's what you bring to the table that matters. I can't prevent certain things. What I can do is know what I've learned myself and learned at the age of 12, that I'm going to show up. I'm going to fight for me.
Take us
Yeah.
back to that childhood experience.
Yeah. Well,
What happened?
so as a child, I was very headstrong. I was one of those kids who wanted to figure things out for himself, very curious, right? Fearless, right? So I wanted to learn how to do diving off the diving board, tricks and stuff. So I thought I'd like to try backflip. That looked like fun, right? Did you know when you do a backflip, you're supposed to dive out from the board, not straight up? Found that out the hard way. I came down on the board. I break my neck. This is a long time ago. They took me to the hospital. I'm laying in bed. I've got a cast on. I know I've gotten a broken neck. The doctor comes in. He says, if you don't die and you're not paralyzed, you will be crippled for the rest of your life. I'm 12 years old.
And you believed him?
He's the doctor. I call people to say goodbye. Right? I didn't die, and I wasn't paralyzed, but it was serious, and they had me in the hospital for over a month, which made me crazy. I made so much trouble that they had to send me home. But I was on my back in a brace for almost over a year. I wasn't allowed to get out of bed or even sit up for a year. Right? The problem I had with walking was I was so atrophied by the time I could get back on my feet. It took me almost a year to start walking normally again. So here's the good news and the bad news. The good news was that I persevered, right? The bad news is nobody had any idea how I felt. I didn't consider how it had affected me existentially at all. I was just focused on getting out of bed, getting back on my feet, getting back to school, right? But a very strange thing happened, which I didn't actually figure out for many years. Grade school, I was fine as a student, right? By the time I got to junior high and high school, I started doing very poorly. I was close to flunking out of high school. Now I've got 2 PhDs. So But if you'd asked me at the time, I would have said, I'm not very smart, right? I would have argued with you about that. What changed that for me, and it's part of my work, is my junior year, I took chemistry. And my chemistry teacher, fortunately, was young and enthusiastic and funny, just the right kind of teacher for me, right? So I really liked the guy. And of course, I was failing his course in the first quarter. So he calls me in after class. He goes, like, why are you failing my course? I go, because I'm not that smart. It was a funny conversation. I wish I had it on video because he's going, yes, you are. I go, like, no, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. So he insisted that he tutor me personally. He did. I got a C in chemistry. Now, that did not convince me that I was intelligent. It did convince me if I worked a bit harder, I might do better. It took me many years to figure out that actually I was intelligent. But here's the part that relates to my patience and understanding the existential importance. It wasn't until about 4 years ago that I raised a question I never actually asked myself. I never asked myself, why did you think you were stupid in high school? Never asked myself that question, right? Which is fascinating if you think about it, right?
But that teacher believed in you. He saw something in you
Right,
that
but the question is, why was I thinking I was stupid in the first
yeah,
place?
yeah.
That I never asked myself, nor did I understand it. It was in a session with a patient. I was relating that experience to help them, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. I remembered what I thought when the doctor came into the room and said what he said. I'd never remembered what I thought. What I thought when he said, if you don't die and if you're not paralyzed, you'll be crippled, was stupid, stupid, stupid. Look what you've done to yourself. All right. This is the part that people don't want to look at. This is the part that caused me years of suffering, not understanding what that was about. It took me going through becoming a lawyer and going to graduate school to convince myself that I might be smarter than I thought I was. So the damage that's done when you're not willing to process, I wasn't willing to process the feelings either. All of that had to happen throughout the rest of my life. Unfortunately, I would encounter people that would help me to address that, see it, deal with it. But just fascinating that all those years, and it wasn't until 3 or 4 years ago that I realized why it almost completely changed my life. If I had followed that course, if I hadn't run into that teacher, I probably would have flunked out of high school, either joined the Merchant Marines, been drafted at the time,
You
right?
made the
Who knows what would
transition.
have happened.
You made the transition from self hate, self blame to self esteem and self love.
Didn't even know it was an issue. That was part of the problem. So that was always there in the background, and also meeting people like my high school teacher, other people who recognized who I was, even though I could not see who I was. Teachers, mentors, other spiritual people I've encountered, things that I've done, including martial arts. Martial arts is all about exceeding what you think your limitations are. It's about finding out you don't have any limits. It's really more about your will to try to exceed. So everything I've done, every lesson I've learned, the courtroom, all right, encountering the injustice in the system and going like, I can either take that lying down or I can push back. And I always choose to push back.
Martial arts. I don't know what martial arts you do. I'm from the Tai Chi school, in the Tai Chi sword form. Uh,
Yeah,
it's
I love Tai Chi. Mostly Japanese karate, but more recently Wing Chun. But I'm quite familiar with Tai Chi and more recently Qigong.
yeah, yeah, it's I've been teaching it for a while, and my partner's teaching it as well. And
Nice.
it's a fascinating school of art that I actually got into many years ago when I was very close to a burnout, and that helped me get through it.
Yeah, yeah. So that is channeling the same forces that I use to help people. And just so people understand, if you look at the book, you may think, I want the pill, I want the surgery, I want the intervention. This guy's asking me to go through years of self-discovery and personal transformation. Sounds very interesting, but don't think of it that way. And I'll tell you why. Because if you talk to me for 2 minutes, if you sit with me in a session, you'll find out the change begins the minute that you fill out the intake packet and follows in every session. That process starts changing you immediately. Right. Within a few months, what most patients will say to me is they may not have less pain, but they don't feel the same way about it. You have incredible potential to deal with the suffering side of the equation. You may be limited physically, but even on the physical side, we don't ignore that. I don't know how many times I've helped a person get clarification on diagnosis, treatment outcomes, proper treatment planning. You know, you would think the doctors are the quarterbacks, but they're not. Right? Person in my position ends up being the quarterback because I know all of these. I started out in a pain management program. I know the disciplines. I talk to them all. They don't talk to each other. There's a lot of problems inherent in the medical system.
Well, I had a fascinating experience when a doctor showed me an X-ray of a person with chronic back pain, and the X-ray looked perfect. And he showed me another X-ray of a person with what looked like a really bad back, and he said, "Well, this guy doesn't have any pain, and the guy whose back looks really good does have chronic pain." And I can't explain it.
Well, people don't like to know that there's a lot of medical conditions that are not black and white. I can show you same example, 10 people with a herniated disc, actual herniated disc, zero pain to extreme and everything in between. And that's because there are many things that contribute to how much pain you have. But the common denominator, no matter how much you're being affected physically, is how you experience it and what you do with it. Ultimately,
I think that's an important take. Yeah, absolutely.
It's the bottom line because it's happening. It's not about the fact that it's happening. You met people that have encountered problems and overcome them. Eventually, you either resign to being done in some fashion, or you resign to recover. But you always have to, if you don't understand you're making a choice, it's not inevitable that you have to be caught up in suffering and depression because you're in pain or because your life has been affected dramatically. That's not an inevitability, it's a possibility. The other possibility is that you learn from this, that you evolve from this, that you find out what you're really all about. I often ask people, what are you here for? And they usually look at me like I'm crazy. What kind of question is that? And I go like, we're all here for something. And if you can figure that out, you'll realize there's more than one way to have that, to be that.
Or the other question, why did this happen to me?
Because you're alive, and being alive comes with both, right? But I wouldn't want suffering any more than anybody else. But like I said, if you choose to look at what happens to you as a possibility, being alive is dangerous, right? On the other hand, it's wonderful. So be as prepared as you can be to deal with things that could happen to you. To ask, why is this happening to me? What, you're not on the list? Right? You want to be impervious to harm? Well, maybe at some point in human evolution, humans will be. I don't know.
There's just one truth. Someday we're all going to die. We're all going to go through that pain of dying.
No, that's no longer a truth. Disease, death is now understood to be a disease process, and it's being treated as a disease. And you and I both know people are living a lot longer. Right? When I was growing up, 60, 65, you were old. You were going to die. Now it's 80, 85, right? No, that if you were 5 years old today, your projected lifespan is 150.
Wow. That's
So,
because of medical advance and
medical advances, health advances, genetic evolution. I mean, everything about us physically, our brain is constantly changing and evolving and renewing. Once we gain a level of cellular control, who knows? It's not to say that people want to live indefinitely. Look, I don't like things happening any more than anybody else does. And I would rather not, but I think it's a form of denial to say, why is this happening to me? What, the universe is against me? I don't think so.
yes, and life is a constant cycle of ups and downs, light and shadow. I think part of our problem is this happiness culture. You're supposed to be positive. you're supposed to be happy. If you aren't that way, if you suffer from depression, if you suffer from pain, something's wrong with you.
You know, look, it's nice to be happy. It feels good, but I think more in terms of being at peace with myself. I seek to be at peace with myself no matter what's happening. That doesn't mean that I'm happy or sad or positive or negative. It just means I'm okay with me. Right? Being okay with yourself can give you a tremendous amount of peace. Happiness, other emotions, they come and go. A lot of them are situational. I don't want my state of being to be dependent on situations.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is the problem,
Now,
I think,
quick footnote to the
yeah,
idea of recovery. Part of the story about my broken neck was I treated myself as if I was fragile throughout high school. No sports, nothing that could possibly injure me, right? That's what the doctor said, you're fragile, right? I was even afraid to do this, right? By the time I got to college, that old innate who I was reasserted itself, and I said, like, you know what? Screw it. If I'm that fragile, let's find out. That's when I signed up for judo and trampoline.
wow.
You can appreciate this. Picture this. I was told I was fragile. I believed this for years. I remember the first throw when my instructor grabbed me and was going to slam me to the ground. That's what they do in judo, right?
Yeah,
I remember
absolutely.
going through the air thinking, I'm either dead or something else. Right? Fortunately, it was something else. But the point is, if I wasn't willing to challenge the limitations, I could have been wrong. It could have gone horribly wrong. But too often I've seen people decide they're done when they're not. And the medical community does not give them enough options. The vocational community does not give them enough options. Lawyers don't, people don't, family doesn't, because they don't really understand what the person's dealing with. Right? Fortunately for me, who I am as a person reasserted itself. And that is the good news. You can never destroy who a person really is. But a lot of people don't know themselves. And that's why this kind of work involves getting to know yourself better, learning how you operate. And then if you need to, I think of it as upgrading the operating system.
Yeah. And these flat on the ground moments are so insightful. I know that from my own life. These were the moments of epiphany. These were the moments when I changed course, chose a different path, uh, chose to lead a different life. Uh, Actually, now very grateful for those flat on the ground moments.
Yeah, and often those moments were unsettling or painful.
Absolutely.
You know, by the time I reached 30, I figured I'd lived a life that was determined for me too much and really had no idea who I really was. That was when I decided to just leave the country, leave the profession behind with not a whole lot of money. Back in the days when people traveled more freely, uh, traveled, started in Amsterdam, you know, visited other places on the way south, ended up in Morocco. I was always fascinated with less Western culture. Eventually made my way down to Marrakesh, which was a favorite destination in those days. And then eventually was adopted by a Bedouin tribe, but because of the shaman, he and I connected. But the part that was really most important about in relation to what we're talking about is I was out in the world without any props for the first time, right? No cell phones, no computers at that point, a certain limited amount of money in my backpack. It was the first time I'd been completely self-reliant, and I was pleasantly surprised. Not only did I find that I was more than capable, but I really liked having to deal with every day not knowing what was going to come next and being able to figure out ways to meet the challenge. I discovered that I was a natural leader. I had no idea. A natural teacher, didn't know that either, right? Certainly much more self-sufficient and independent than I thought I was. So, but that initially was very painful. There was a moment in that journey where I thought I was going crazy, but
Yeah, these
I bore
moments of
with it.
transition are scary, and
Yeah,
that's why people are so afraid of making changes that are necessary in their lives.
yeah.
Uh, I think possibly the biggest fear people have is the fear of change.
I fear not being open to change. right? Knowing that something could shut it down, something could go like, that's it, forget about changing, forget about growth. This is too much. We're done.
Yeah.
Could happen. I have no illusions. I have a lot of skills, but I have no illusions that couldn't happen to me. You know, in the martial arts, there's a saying, no matter how tough you are, there's always somebody tougher.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll end it there. We could have a much longer conversation. It was great talking to you, and great to have you on Living to Be. And I really want to acknowledge you for the work you're doing, and
Thank you.
for helping people in this situation. I think it's really important work.
Yeah, I want to encourage people. The book is good. It's worth reading. There's a lot of really important information in there, but start asking questions. Go to the website, ask me some questions. We'll have live events in the fall. We're going to have some classes that we're putting out there. People need to get into this kind of conversation like we're having. And we didn't even get to specific examples about what do you do with this? What do you do with that? What do you do with this? Because the book isn't just about what you're dealing with. It's about mastery, not management. Mastery means you are not being run by the pain. You found a way to build your life in the context of having it.
So your book can be ordered on your website, or
Yeah, if you go to New
anywhere where
Options,
good books are sold.
yeah, New Options Inc., you'll find an access to Amazon for the book for that. There's announcements coming about ongoing classes. There'll be some live events. But what I've come to believe, especially from doing podcasts and talking to people, they really need to be in conversation about this. There's a lot more to be learned than you can read in that book.